Hello my friends and welcome back to another painting video, and in this painting video I'm going to be painting Karla Von Kill from the Blood Bowl game. So this is a Forge World miniature and this is a star player Karla Von Kill, so if you play the Blood Bowl game you'll be familiar with her. And we're going to paint this model up quite a little bit more advanced than normal. So we're going to paint this one up to follow the box art colours. So we're going to paint her sort of like blues and greys and things like that. But as I always do, we're just going to start off with the skin, and we're going to start off with the hair and things as well first, just to make sure that we've got the most extreme details done before we move on to some of the bigger parts. So for part one, it's the hair and the skin. So we're going to start with beige red on the skin, and this is a little bit like the Games Workshop Bugman's Glow, so it's a similar sort of colour. I find this to be a little bit lighter, so it's a little bit nicer to build colours back up onto it. And I'm just going around all of the skin, so the face, the arms, the hands, things like that. Now once you've done the skin, just going to go around and do the hair as well. And the reason why I'm doing the hair at the same time as the skin, and one or two other parts at the same time as the skin, is just because when we put the wash area on, we want to try and tie these colours together. So I didn't want to paint the hair back over the top where the skin is, once I've spent a little bit of time making her skin tones look good, and possibly make any mistakes. So I'm just doing these together, just to kind of tie these together when we put the wash on. So I'm just going around the hair. The hair does get a little bit fiddly just around the front here, and this is the reason why I'm doing this now, is because if I make a mistake going around these curls, we can always build these back up with the base colour of that beige red again, and it doesn't matter too much. Don't forget to do around the back and things like that as well, and just up here across the top. And I'm just using a German grey for this. So this is a really dark sort of grey. I mean, you can use a black if you want, or some other kind of really dark grey. But this is one of my favourite colours, so I'm just using that to make sure that I get all of the darker points done. As I say, I'm sticking by just doing a few little bits just across the top. So the wings and her little crown here, I'm just painting with the Citadel Retributor armour. Retributor armour is one of my favourite sort of metallic colours. This is a true metallic metal, so this isn't going to be a non-metallic. I'm going to make this nice and easy just across the top, because the focus points on this miniature are going to be things like the face and of course the armour. We're going to try and make the armour stand out, so we're going to go a little bit more advanced, and we're going to try a few different blending techniques a little bit later on the armour. Now once we're done with that and everything's dry, I'm going to use the flesh wash with this, and people do ask me if I water down my washes, and a lot of the time I don't water down the washes, I just use a damp brush. So for this one what I've done is I've just added a small tiny drop of water into the wash, just to try to make it move a little bit more freely, but also to make the shading just a little bit more subtle, especially around the face, because you're going to build those colours back up, and I didn't want it to overpower and darken that face down too much. The good thing with this is flesh wash and flesh colours are brilliant going across the gold. This is why I painted the gold, the crown, just at the same time as the face, because we're using the same wash at the same time, so that way we kind of get in two birds with one stone. And once our wash has dried up now, we're just going to go back now and rebuild all of those colours on the face. So starting with that beige red, so we're starting to go back through that beige red, and as you see, just building the colours up with that face. I'm just leaving certain areas in the shade, so I'm just leaving certain areas where that wash is sat. So I'm just kind of painting around the nose, around the chin, around the cheekbones especially, and I'm kind of leaving those. I'm going to leave the lips, because we want the lips to be slightly darker to the rest of the face, and I'm also leaving sort of like little gaps down the sides of the nose. I'm leaving the recesses in the eyes. Now if you're confident and you enjoy painting eyes, you can paint the eyes a little bit later. The eyes on this model are particularly small, so I haven't painted the eyes on this model because it is really fiddly, so I've decided not to do that. Instead we're focusing on building those tones up on the skin. So with that beige red then we're also going to mix in a small amount of basic skin tone. So this is a slight highlight or a highlighted colour. We're going to mix these in at about half and half, so 50-50, and we're just going to build those colours back up. So again, just catching the nose, the cheekbones especially. We're staying more towards the top area of the cheekbones this time, not going as extreme and not covering the whole face anymore, so just trying to stick in some of the higher areas. We're also going around the knuckles and the fingers and some things like that, and just some of the muscle tones in her arms as well. So once that area is dry, as you can see, now I'm just going straight in with the basic skin tone. So by creating that little blend of the beige red and basic skin tone together, that gives you sort of like a really good middle point to the highlight. So when you put the basic skin tone on then, it doesn't jump out too much, it's not too extreme, which allows you then to build these colours gently up and to build that tone up a lot more naturally without it looking too looking like it's standing out too much or as if it's too wrong. So as you see, I'm now just catching the cheekbones, the chin, the nose, the eyebrows area and things like that. And as you can see, I'm just trying to leave some of the darker areas then just a little bit below. Now it is important to stress that when painting, it is important to thin down your paints. So also make sure that you have put a little bit of water or a little bit of flow improver into your paints to make sure that these paints are thin enough that when they dry to a really nice blended colour without looking too as I say, too extreme. Because if you don't water your paints down, you put them straight out of the tub onto the model, they don't have the opportunity or they don't have the ability to sort of blend back into the model in the same way. So watering down your paints is a hugely important part of painting your miniatures, especially if you want to blend those colours together. So getting used to just mixing a little bit of water or a little bit of flow improver just to get that paint to move more on your brush is hugely important. So once the skin is dry, all I'm going to do then is just add a little bit of wash across the hair. So I'm just using a little bit of Null Oil. Null Oil is a black wash, so you can use any black wash of your choosing. Of course, Null Oil is one of everyone's favourites. And once that's dry, then I'm just going to go across the very edges of the hair, just going around the curls with the very tip of my brush, as you can see. And I'm just painting these with a blue-grey pale, which is quite a nice mid-tone grey, but it's not like a flat grey, because it's got that little bit of blue in there. It's got a little bit of tone, a little bit of colour, and a little bit of character as well. So if you paint just a very edge, just across some of these curls and just highlight some of the hair, that's a really nice, easy way of making the hair stand out a little bit so that it doesn't look too flat then. As you can see, I'm just kind of following the lines. I mean, you could dry brush this if you want, but as I say in a lot of my paintings, I'm not a huge fan of dry brushing too much because you can lose a lot of details. So that's part one complete. Now once we've completed part one, part two is all just about filling in all of the basic colours. So what we're going to do is we're just going to cover all of the model in the basic colours that we need, then we're going to wash them down and then we're going to build them back up. So what I'm doing with this one is I'm just using a sky grey, which is a really light grey. And I'm just painting all of the clothing, so the trousers and the top and the shirt and everything like that underneath the armour is all being painted in this nice light sky grey. The sky grey is a cool colour, it's a really nice colour. It works really well with a lot of different things, and it can be highlighted quite nicely with a white tone as well. So although it's already quite bright, it can be brightened up quite nicely as well. So as you can see, I'm just colouring and just painting all of these little areas that I want to be sky grey, trying to be a little bit conscious as to where my paint is landing. I don't want to go too extreme and too messy. I'm still trying to be a little bit sort of careful where I'm putting the paint as well. And as you can see, this colour does tone in quite nicely. Once the sky grey is complete, you're just using an earth colour. So for this one, this is a really a slightly different sort of brown that I would normally use to do things like leathers and things like that. So just offering a little bit of a different colour. So earth is a really sort of like, I want to kind of say a middle of the road kind of brown. So this is something that you can darken down with a shade, but you can lighten back up quite easily as well. And it looks brilliant when you lighten it back up in like one or two quick and simple steps. So it's not something that you need to be too worried or too over-focused on. It's something that we can tone back up and make look fantastic quite simply. So it does have a really nice sort of warm colour to it. So it's not like a really dark, heavy colour. And while I'm doing that, I'm just doing the leathers, and I'm also doing the shoes at the same time in the same colour. So we're doing her wrist straps, the knee straps, the belt buckle. As you can see, the straps of the armour just across the top there, just around her armour. We're doing all of these the same sort of colour. And then we're moving on to another favourite colour of mine, which is bone white. This is a nice creamy sort of white, so this is a light colour, but being a creamy colour, this makes it slightly different, and it makes it stand out a little bit different to things like the grey that we've used, or if you tone things up into white, this will also stand off. So this is a great colour to use, especially on something like socks, because this is going to make the socks look a little bit more sock-like. From there, I'm just using a little bit of orange, so this is an orange brown, and I'm just putting that orange brown just across the little tab going around her ankle. Again, because I'm following the box art, she's got a little bit of an orange sort of strap just going around the bottom of her sock here. So we differ slightly from the box art, but that's okay, because it's nice to do your own little thing as well as trying to paint something that's quite similar. So the difference is, on the box art, her boots are a little bit more silver, which you can paint them silver if you prefer, but I'm just keeping them all together in this sort of like brown colour, and I'll show you why a little bit later. And there we go, just using a little bit of an edge just across the base of the boots here, so just painting them black, painting black just around the ridge and just across the underneath as well, just to make the boots look a little bit different and stand out as well, because you don't want them all just one colour. As you noticed, I painted the laces in the same colour, the same bone white that I've done the socks as well, again just tying things together and making them nice and simple and look a little bit more pleasing on the eye. You don't have to be too hugely careful at this stage, although with black, and especially a definite colour like black, it is always good to try to be a little bit careful, because you don't want to kind of be a little bit too messy with black, because it can be a bit of a pain then to build that colour back up. Then we're going to focus on the armour plates. So for the armour plates, I'm using a medium blue. And the medium blue is a great colour. This is exactly as it says on the tin. It is a very good medium blue. So it is really good sort of middle of the road kind of blue, if you like. And what we're going to do is we're going to get really creative a little bit later, and we're going to try to build those colours up on this blue using a lot of different sort of like blending techniques and mixing sort of colours and things like that. And we're going to get this blue to really pop a little bit later. But for now, as a base tone, this is where we're going. So just using this medium blue as a very sort of base colour, just to make sure that we've got somewhere to start. So just make sure to cover all of the armour plates in this blue, including the shoulder pad just up here. And there we go. So once we've done that blue, and the blue is all dry, we're just going to move on to silver. So I'm using a gunmetal. This is very similar to a lead belcher from Citadel as well. So I'm just using this gunmetal now across the shoulder pad, and I'm also going to do all of the spikes that are sticking out of the armour, and more importantly, I am actually going to paint all of those little rivets as well. Now this is something that you've got to be really careful of, although not hugely at this stage, and this is why I'm doing it at this stage, is because if you paint the rivets originally with this silver, this then gives you somewhere like a sort of a base colour, so that it gives you something that you can work on later. So when you put the wash over the top, yes, it's going to darken things down. However, if you do make a mistake at this stage, it's easy to fix, because we're still only working with the base tones. Whereas if you work for ages and ages on your armour, and then you try putting your silver on later and you make a mistake, it's harder then to match those colours after you've blended. So try to put the silver onto the rivets and things, and try to make your rivets a bit stand out now while you've got the opportunity, because a little bit later, although we're going to go back and just paint a little dot on top, it's always good to have that base there already. So there we go, once everything is complete, so once we've base coated all of the rest of the miniature, it is as simple as just covering the miniature in a wash, apart from all of the skin that we've done. So we're just going to use that Null Oil once more. So as I said, everyone's favourite. Null Oil is a great, easy to use, watered down black wash. This is great, it manipulates and moves around the miniature really easily. The only thing you've got to be careful of is don't let it pool too much in certain areas, because you don't want big black splotches just lying around. But as you see, you could just manipulate this around the model quite simply, and it moves around the model quite nicely as well. You might notice just on the back here, depending on how you want to paint it, I've painted the back, so just around the shirt, using the sky grey, so it looks like she's got an extended shirt on. Now I know some people might prefer to paint that back bit with skin as well, so you could paint that with skin or as a shirt or whichever. It's your model, it's up to you. This is just a guide to show you sort of the colours I've used and how I've painted this model up to this stage. So I opted to paint her wearing a full shirt rather than having her back showing in skin. So as you see, just using this null Nile now, just to fully cover all of the model. So I'm trying to manipulate this null Nile around the model as much as I can without letting it pool and darken too much. So it's just about covering all of those different areas, including things like the little braces as well, which can be a little bit difficult, but if you take your time and manipulate the wash, it will look lovely. So now the part 2 is complete and she is dry. She's good enough to go on the board. I mean, you could use her if you just wanted her as a quick, easy stage, and you wanted her just to look fine and play on the board. She's good enough after stage 2. However, we want to push her a little bit further, and we want to get her to the standard where you really want to show her off and be proud to have it on your display shelf, as well as when you're playing on the board. So we're going back to that sky grey first, because one of the larger areas is this grey colour. We're just going to go back to that sky grey. We're going to build those colours back up, as you can see. And if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll notice that I build these colours up while leaving little hints and little bits of the brush strokes there, and part of that is there so that it gives you that illusion of depth as well. So don't worry too much about your brush strokes. With the paint being slightly watered down and things, it'll blend nicely into the miniature anyway. So that's all I'm doing, as you can see, is I'm just starting to build that back up, but I'm leaving where that null Nile has left and sat in the recess points, just to leave that little bit darker area in the creases and in those folds and things like that, and that's what's going to give us the depth to the miniature. So I'm just following around as much of the clothing as I can and just trying to be careful on the folds here. There you go, as you can see the folds. Then obviously we're going to follow those across, but we're going to try and do it without covering over the shaded points. So let's see if we can just show you a little bit here. So there we go, we're just building across, as you can see, just across the back here, trying not to let the wash, not to let the paint just go into those areas where the wash is sat the most. See, that's going to be our darkest points. That's going to give us the depth. But as you see there, I'm just leaving little lines between where I'm painting, so that again creates more folds and creates extra folds in those trousers and in the shirt and things like that, because it's all done in the same sort of way. So we're just going to mix a small amount of that dead white into the sky grey, and we're just going to use a nice thinned down version of this paint just to build up those highlights as well. So we're just going across some of those folds and some of the parts across where those clothing is. We're just going to pick out the extreme edges, so we're just going to pick out the folds, as I say, and some of the creases and things just across the trousers, and of course across the sleeves on the arms and bits like that as well, just to make sure that we get this as a nice highlighted colour from that original sky grey. So yeah, just trying to catch the raised areas here, trying to make sure that that sky grey and white mixture is just catching on the very the biggest folded areas. And I'm sorry that the camera is slightly out of focus. Very awkward on times to try to paint and get the right angle and things like that as well. Well, we're just going to move on then back to the armour. Now this is where we're going to get really creative, and we're going to build this armour tone up in a really lovely fashion. Now this armour tone, we're going to spend a little bit of time building this up, and there is a good reason for it, because when we look at this armour, we really want this to stand out. This is going to be the main focus of the miniature, and this is going to be the area of the miniature that people are going to notice the most and think, wow, you've done a fantastic job on that. So we're going to spend more time on the armour than anything else at the moment. So what we're going to do is we're going to base back the medium blue. So we're painting this medium blue back in, but what we're doing is we're just leaving the gaps and creases in where the rivets are and around areas where the shade has fallen. So that's creating the first original area of depth. So building this colour back up, this is going to give us the depth from the shaded areas back up to the main sort of colours. As you can see there, I'm not going over the area of the shield. See, I'm just painting around that shielded point on the back, and that's the beginning of the depth. So we're going to build our depth up in a rather strong and extreme way. So this is just using the base colour that we started with, so the medium blue originally. Now, when I said earlier about watering down your paints and making sure your paints flow onto the miniature, it's very important that we water the paints down quite a lot with this. So we're going to water these down even more. So we're going to water them down a little bit until they are quite watery, quite wet, and that they fall off the brush a lot easier. Now this does take a little bit of practice to get right, so I suggest just mixing your paint, mixing a little bit of water or your flow improver until you get to a consistency that is quite flowable, quite pliable, quite movable. And then see how you go. Now it does take practice, so I wouldn't expect you to get it right the first time. So just take your time, try your own other models first before you take on the big project that you really want, and see how you go. So what I'm doing then is, what I'm going to do is, using that medium blue, I'm also mixing in a little bit of electric blue. Now electric blue is a much brighter blue, so with electric blue being a much brighter blue, we're not going to go so extreme as to put loads of electric blue in first. What I'm doing is I'm mixing in a small amount first just to get a tone above what we were using. And what I'm doing with that is I'm just again going around painting the areas, but I'm trying not to paint the whole areas now. So we're trying to paint but leaving a little bit more of that darker colour underneath. So we're going to start by painting all of these little shields and all of these little bits on the front. But if I show you just across the back, just like so. So as you can see, I'm just painting down, but I'm not too worried about the brush strokes. I'm not too worried about how much of the paint goes onto, or how much I cover the miniature. And what I'm trying to do is I'm painting from the top to the bottom. Okay, so by doing that, that gives us a little bit of a colour boost first of all. Now second, as you see, by adding more electric blue in this time, I'm not painting as much across the bottom, so I'm trying to focus the highlight across the top. So we're trying to highlight the top area and leave the bottom a little bit darker, like so. Now as you can see, the paint is very thin, so it is quite movable. And again here, just painting across the top of the breastplate. We're not painting the whole breastplate, just catching the top area. So we're leaving probably about, I don't know, say something like about 70% of the armour. So you're leaving 30% at the bottom to stay darker or to stay in the original colour. And because the paint is so thin, and because we blend in these colours in slightly each time, the more that you blend these colours in and the more of this highlight that you put in each time, the more the paint is going to blend, and the more that blend is going to look a lot more natural. See, you don't have to be perfectly precise, and as you see, I didn't go all the way down to the very edge of the armour with this. So using the same idea, as you see, I've just gone to the electric blue now. And this time I'm only painting a smaller amount up the top, you see? So we're just painting across the top half of the armour now, not the bottom, like so. And because the paint is thin, that's not going to matter. You're not going to notice those brush strokes. It's not going to look like you've made loads of brush strokes and you've painted the miniature. Because the paint is thin, it's going to blend in together. And because we're toning these up in stages. So we went from the medium blue, then a little bit to the electric blue, then a lot more of the electric blue, then just to the electric blue. It becomes a lot more of a consistent tone, so the blend looks a lot more natural and looks a lot nicer on the eye as well. Like I say, this is something that does take a lot of practice. This is the kind of blending that you see painters use when they paint up a lot of different layers for skin, a lot of different layers for armour and things like that. And it's perfect. It looks fantastic when you can get it right and you can sit down and really spend time getting it perfect. It looks fantastic. So using that electric blue, which is already quite vibrant, I'm adding a small amount of dead white in, which, as you know, if you followed any of my other videos, is a very, very, very vibrant white colour. So this highlights but also makes the colours pop a little bit more. And this time what I'm doing, instead of using brush strokes, as you notice, I'm just dabbing the very tip of the brush. And again, it's just across the top area. Now, dabbing the top of your brush like this is called stippling. And the reason why I'm stippling at this stage is because this is creating a sort of rough effect look on the armour. So, although this is going to blend in quite nicely, it is also going to draw your eye to the fact that the armour is going to look a little bit worn, which is exactly what we want, okay? So you can use the tip of your brush and just dab it, and that's called stippling. And by doing that stippling, that creates a completely different effect on your armour then and on your miniatures. Now from there, we're going to use the final stage to the armour, and this is now using things like edge highlights. So what I'm doing is I'm using the very tip of my brush, and I'm using a pastel blue. Now a pastel blue is a lot more of a muted blue. So this is a very light blue, and what I'm doing is I'm just painting around the very edge, as you can see, but using the real extreme tip of the brush as well. I'm just dragging a few very faint thin lines, and I can't stress enough that these have got to be faint thin lines across their armour. And the reason why I'm doing that is because, as you can see, it's just creating scratches and scrapes across their armour, so it makes their armour look a little bit more worn. Again, it's vitally important that this paint has been thinned down, because if you make any mistakes, it doesn't matter too much. You can always build back up from there, or you can put multiple layers on and things like that. Now for the scratches, as you can see, I'm just painting sort of like small crisscrosses here and there, and again it's just about giving your eye something different to look at. So without realising, all these different layers and all these different blends, and then these little scratches and things that you've got as the extreme highlight, this is what's going to make this look a lot more natural to the eye, and this is what's going to draw your eye to the model and to the miniature, and this is what's going to make it stand out incredibly well. And of course, when you pick this model up and take a look, or you keep her on display, you can be very proud of how much work you've put into it as well. So using that stippling effect that I talked about, we're going to try and use that now just on the leathers. So the stippling, as you can see, where the wash, the null oil, is sat on the belt, just in the recessed area going through, I'm just going to stipple the original colour, that original earth colour, on the top and the bottom edges, and then again using the very tip of the brush as well. I will occasionally sort of just drag a few scratches and things like that, because leathers do get scratched and scraped and beaten and battered, so they can look a lot more worn as well. So we're just using that stippling effect and some of those little scrapes and little just very edges of the brush, just to drag it across. So as you can see, I'm just stippling across the leather knee pad here, and I'm trying to leave some of the original area where the shader sat as well, to just kind of create that little depth and create that element of depth as much as I can. Here we go, just across those leather straps here. Again, this takes time, takes practice. It's not something that you can just pick up and do immediately, so don't be too frustrated if it takes a little bit of time or if it doesn't look exactly perfect, because painting is all about the journey. It's all about learning, progressing, working hard to sort of learn new techniques and try new techniques, and this is why in my videos I try to show you something different each time. So here we go, just painting up the boots here as well. Just trying to leave a little bit of that shade in the recesses, just building up the character on those shoes and building up the character on those boots at the same time. Just like so. And occasionally in the top left hand corner you can see how close I'm getting to the miniature to paint. It isn't actually my face or anything like that, but I do use a pair of magnifying goggles, especially for things like this, because these areas and these parts are so small that being the old man that I am, my eyes aren't quite as good as they used to be, so having a pair of magnifying goggles helps me out so much you wouldn't believe. So using that earth, because earth is a brown colour, so it's a really good earthy colour. With this we can actually mix a little bit of bone white, which is that creamy highlight. So we can mix about half and half with this bone white and the earth colour together to create the highlights that we want. And with the highlight colours then, we're just going to build up some more of those scratches and some more of those scrapes across the boots and across the leathers. And this is going to make those leathers pop out just enough that they catch the eye and that they drag your attention to some of the areas, some of the other details other than just the armour. The armour though is already looking fantastic, and she's already starting to build and starting to look brilliant. She's starting to look like the model that we want to display in our display cabinet, and this is exactly what we want. So just taking your time, using the very tip of your brush, as you can see, and again look, there's some scrapes and scratches just across the boot here. There we go, some more scrapes, some more scratches. Just the very tip of your brush, so nice and simple. Don't overthink it, don't go too extreme. Doesn't matter if it's not perfect. Part of worn leathers and things like that are supposed to be scratchy and scrapey, and like I say, as long as your paints are nice and thin, those scrapes and things will blend in really nicely as it dries. Don't forget, when you paint on your miniature, the paint does come out and look a little bit brighter than what it actually is, because once it starts to dry down, it will dry down a little bit darker anyway. So don't be too worried or too concerned if it looks a little bit too bright to begin with. Now, probably one of the more frustrating and hardest part to concentrate on that I found with this model was going back and repainting the socks. Now, I know that there is the opportunity and the option of doing a straight dry brush across, and again that will add to the roughness of the model and things like that. And if you'd like, you can dry brush this area as well. But I just wanted to try to level up the painting a little bit and just try to be a little bit more controlled with it. So I'm actually trying to use the very tip of the brush and paint each one of these strands in by hand. So I'm using that bone white originally again and just building these back up. It is time consuming, it does take a lot of concentration, and I'm very lucky that I've got my magnifying glasses, because this was quite a difficult area of the model to get right. So take your time and try to have fun with it. Don't let this part of the model defeat you. So like I say, you can do a little bit of dry brushing if you want, and things like that instead. And once the bone white is dry, then we're just using the elfic flesh as a highlight as well. Now again, if you've seen any of my other videos, you'd know that the elfic flesh is a perfect highlight to that bone white. It has a real nice vibrancy to it, but it still keeps that cream consistency as well. So as you can see, I'm just trying to take as much time as I can, being as gentle as I can, just using the very tip of my brush as much as possible. The danger you go with dry brushing as well is if you dry brush and you're a little bit too careless with your dry brush, you can get some of that dry brushing onto parts of the model that you've spent so long painting on, and you wouldn't want to ruin bits that you've spent so long trying to get right. So it's good just spending that little bit extra time, a little bit of extra concentration to just get these little areas exactly as you want them, just like so. If you do make any mistakes and paint some of this bone white onto and the elfic flesh and some of these highlights onto the boots, you can always fix them up with a little bit more of that earth anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And then once again, just going to go back and just paint on that orange brown, so we're just going to colour that orange back up a little bit. Again, same rules apply, so it's just about painting the colour on while leaving the darker bits where the shade has landed. Now once again, because we're becoming quite big fans of this stippling effect on this model, once again we're just going to use a little stippling effect for silver. So we're using a silver. Now this is a much brighter silver than the original silver. You can tone this back up if you want by going with the original silver first, then using this as an edge highlight if you like. However, I've just gone for stippling this on, so I've thinned this down quite a bit, and I'm just stippling this using the very edge of the brush just across the metals, the metallics, and the area on her shoulder pad. Now the hardest part I found with this was just going back in and painting the very tiny little rivets on the model. So that's the bit that I would suggest taking as much time as possible over, just to make sure that you get that perfectly right, and so that you get that exactly how you want it without having silver all over the hard work and the blue that we've done. So like I said earlier, painting the rivets on early saves you the stress later on of worrying about whether or not that silver is going to ruin the blue and all of the hard work that you've done. And just going around the edges, just across the top as well, just across the side of the armour here. And for one of the final stages then, we're just going to rebuild up the colour on her headband, on her crown here. So we're just going to paint up the areas around where the shade is sat. So just trying to paint the band itself going across her head, and some of the wing parts as well. And once that's done, we're just going to use that silver once more that we've just used, this time in a very sort of dry brush type of way, and we're just going to very gently use a little light dry brush across the very tips, just to make the gold look a little bit more worn. And for the very final step, that's all we're going to do is paint that dead white, that bright white, that vibrant white, just across the strings holding her armour together, holding her breastplate together, just across here. And again, this now will then make the strings pop, and it will finish the model off lovely. And then you can base her as ever you like, base her however you like. And I hope that you enjoyed that video. This I really enjoyed. It's one of my favourite models to paint. It's been brilliant to try out a few new textures, a few new styles, the stippling on the armour, the scratches on the armour. She looks fantastic. As always, my friends, thank you so much for your continued support, your amazing comments, and of course for tuning in and watching my little painting videos. Thank you again, and I hope you enjoyed this video.